Und bleiben wir noch bei ein paar Zahlen, meine Damen und Herren. Vielleicht haben Sie es gestern gehört, eine ganz interessante Zahl. 40% der unter 30-Jährigen sind eifersüchtig. Auf was? Auf das Handy oder das Smartphone des Partners, weil der andere eben zu viel Zeit, zu viel Aufmerksamkeit in dieses Gerät steckt. Kurze und ehrliche Frage an Sie, dann sage ich Ihnen auch die bundesweite Zahl. Wie viele von Ihnen lassen, wenn Sie schlafen, zum Beispiel in der letzten Nacht, seien Sie bitte ehrlich, das Handy an? Zeigen Sie mal auf. Relativ repräsentativ, 42% der Deutschen machen das inzwischen und auch eine ganz interessante Zahl, die unter 19-Jährigen, die eine besondere Affinität zu diesem Gerät haben, sind gefragt worden, was ist für dich wichtiger? Die Liebe, dein Partner oder dein Smartphone? Auf was würdest du eher verzichten? Sie merken schon, in welche Richtung es geht. 72% haben gesagt, auf Smartphone verzichte ich auf gar keinen Fall. Kann der Partner gehen? Mein Smartphone soll bleiben. Wir haben mehr Zahlen für Sie. Ganz, ganz wichtig ist, dass Sie jetzt Ihr Smartphone rausholen. Denn es war ein Wunsch aus diesem Plenum heraus, dass man sich bei dieser Tagung mehr einbringen kann. Und dem wollen wir jetzt Rechnung tragen, meine Damen und Herren. Wir zeigen Ihnen jetzt mal eine Nummer, die Sie hinter mir sehen können, die Sie rechts und links gleich sehen können. Diese Nummer ist die Nummer, mit der Sie sich einbringen können. 0151 1200 12 80. Da steht sie 0151 1200 1280. Da können Sie Ihre Fragen per SMS an uns schicken oder Sie können sie mailen an fragen@owm.de. Das können Sie ab sofort machen. Vielleicht haben Sie auch Fragen zu der Studie, die wir jetzt kennenlernen werden. Tina Beuchler hat sich schon angesprochen, da gehen wir jetzt mal ein bisschen intensiver rein. Ganz interessante Ergebnisse aus der Marketing2020 Studie. Und wir sind froh, dass wir jetzt einen dabei haben hier in Berlin, der mit für diese Studie verantwortlich ist. Please welcome, ladies and gentlemen, Frank van Driest.
So, hallo, danke für die Einladung, hier zu sprechen. But this is the last sentence that I'll be speaking in German, because I've learned it the hard way. I speak sometimes on holiday at the gas station or at the camp station, a few words, and I actually had a nice grade for German in high school. So when a couple of years ago, one of our clients, a German client, asked, well, we would really like you to facilitate the whole workshop in German. I thought, I know Guten Tag, danke für die Einladung. I said, okay, I'll do that. Well, boy, did I learn the hard way, never ever to overestimate your own English, so your own German, from my case then. So thanks for having me here. What I'm going to talk about is Marketing 2020 as was introduced. But very, very quickly, a few words about Effective Brands and myself. So I started Effective Brands 12 years ago. And actually, in those 12 years, we kept a brutal focus on one thing: global marketing effectiveness. How do you help companies to answer the following questions? Where to grow and how to play? We call that strategy. What your brand has to stand for, we call that purposeful positioning. How do you deliver the promise that your brand makes? We call that organization. And then finally, how do you equip your marketing community for sustainable growth? We call that global marketing excellence. So it's those four questions that we focus on. And we do that by now with some 75 consultants in 5 different offices across the globe. But we have a very important mantra in our own company, which is we shouldn't be talking about ourselves in fora like that. We should talk about the content. We should talk about our expertise. And therefore, I'm really proud to today talk to you about Marketing 2020, which I dare to say is absolutely the biggest, the most comprehensive global marketing leadership initiative ever launched. So it's really a nice and important moment for us too, to be launching that here in the German audience. But for sure, we didn't do this by ourselves. there were some really big and very helpful and passionate, motivated partners here. First of all, das Markenverband and OEM in the German market. But on a global scale, we had parties like Spencer Stuart, who were interested about the leadership, Forbes, who is in America our publicity partner, Matrix Lab, who helped in a lot of the research, and Adobe, who is very interested in anything with marketing and digital. And why did we do this study? We started this study because, and I think nobody here would argue with me, that the world in which we live in the past decade has fundamentally transformed. And as a result, what we do in marketing has changed beyond recognition. But then there's a strange fact. Some of you might remember or might have read about Procter & Gamble. In the 1950s, Procter & Gamble was the first company to ever introduce the concept of brand management. And they created an organization. And when I look at some of our clients and the organigrams they have and the way they do marketing, it looks eerily the same as what Procter & Gamble introduced in the 50s. i.e., what has changed beyond recognition, but how we do marketing has not really changed. That was the reason to start this mega research. And before we started the quant part, we talked to some 300 CMOs, CEOs, and other influencers. Think of people like Martin Sorrell, but also the guy who did the digital campaign for Obama. So a lot of, let's say, in-depth interviews by specialists and CMOs. After that, we went quant. And over 10,000 participants across the world in almost 100 countries participated in this study. And I'll be sharing the results. And very nicely so, there were also 361 respondents in the German market. And I'll be quoting some of them and showing what they said compared to the global benchmark. Now, very briefly then still about the research itself. I think it was nice to see a good spread. And in a sense, it was surprising that actually almost a third of the respondents were at junior level, a third at media, roughly, and a third at senior level. But also across types of businesses, B2B, B2C. Many companies there in both at the same time and indicated that. But also, let's say, the industry and the categories people were working in. And then obviously, if you asked about the function, the large majority was in marketing, marketing comms, or either one of those. Then to cut a long story short, the essence of the study was, what does it take to win when we ready ourselves for Marketing 2020? And to answer that question, we didn't only ask a lot of questions about all the levers of marketing. We also very much asked, what these days are your most important KPIs? What do you want and what are you being held accountable for as a marketing leader? And there were basically three answers. Number one, business growth. Number two, return on marketing investment. And number three, brand health. We then asked, so if business growth is your most important KPI, how does your brand, your company perform versus your peers, versus your competitors? Three answer options: we underperform versus competitors, at par, or we overperform. That gave us very interesting insights, because that allowed us to compare winners with losers. What do overperformers do different or better or less of than underperformers? But there was a risk. We saw a risk, because this is what people indicated themselves. So what we did is we asked the New York University team of data specialists to validate the answers on performance versus external independent data, for example, market share growth. And then look at those people that indicated that who overperformed versus underperformed, did they give the right answer? Did they give a true and honest answer? Well, there's a long story to be said, but what we typically saw is that the top quarter overperformance And, they said it correctly, and the same for the real underperformers. And it makes sense. If you're really, winning with your company, you know it. The same if you're really going down. You'll know it that your competitor is better. The middle group was a bit fuzzier, so we left them out in the analysis when I compare winners from losers. So, how to organize for growth, how to make sure that we're going to win. The framework with which I'm going to take you through the results is the following. First, there's the what, the content, what you do as marketers. The basis is big insights. Then a purposeful positioning, a shared destiny, and then a total experience in which you deliver that promise of your positioning in the outside world. So that's what you do outside. But very importantly, also if you look at winners versus losers, is how do you make that happen, especially in your own company? How do you connect global with local? How do you connect marketing with other functions? How do you inspire people around your vision in your own company, but also in other functions? How do I focus, and how do I'm sure that we align around the same priorities and that we have the same KPIs across all of our organization? How do we organize? How do we define roles, responsibilities? Who gets to decide what, and who gets to be consulted and informed, etc.? And last and certainly not least, how do we equip our marketeers for growth? What excellence, what capabilities do we need to build? So that's the framework, the inside, what characteristics, and then how do you make those happen? Let's start with the first. Big insights. We call it big insights. It was, and this is not my quote, this was in one of the roundtables. An American CMO said about big data, he said, big data, you know what? Big data is like sex at high school. Everybody talks about it and nobody does it. And the few that do it are often very lousy at it. So we rather talk about big insights. And this is an interesting one, and what you don't see, that we picked this from a list of 10 trends. We asked people, what are the important trends that will shape the future, shape your future and your success? And when I looked at the result, I was really disappointed, because everybody said the same, winners and losers. And I thought, yeah, of course, we all go to the OBM. We all read the same books. We all read the same blogs. We listen to the same gurus. Of course, we're going to say the same thing about what's important for our future. There's one exception, the importance of big data. That is the only one where winners distinguish themselves from losers. It's the winners who understand 30% more so than losers that big data will have an incredible impact on the future. And actually, they don't only see and recognize its importance, they're also better equipped. 39% for the losers, 48% for the winners. And interestingly so, when you just look at Germany, 55%. So actually, Germany is ahead of the game if you compare to the global benchmark. The second topic is purposeful positioning. I think, for myself, I've been passionate about this for a long time, but it was very pleasing to see the results here. An overwhelming majority of the respondents said, yes, we believe that brands with a societal purpose, with societal relevance, have a bigger chance at being successfully in the business. Only 8% thought about that, answered that negatively. And this is a little story I want to share. This is from a client. Unfortunately, they're not in Germany, so you might not know them. But it's a beautiful case. And it's from the world's leading paint company. It's a company called AkzoNobel. And they've got their consumer paint brand is called Dulux in most markets. It's called different in some other markets like Flexa or Levi's or Caral. But they have the same positioning for the brand, the same purposeful positioning. And what they say, actually, we're not in the business of selling tins of paint. We're in the business of selling tins of optimism. because we believe that people's surroundings influence how they think, feel, and behave. So their purpose is to add color to people's lives. And that's an interesting one, because they do that on a very functional level. They also play a lot in their communication with the inspiration and so on. But on a societal level, this picture, this is a favela in Rio de Janeiro. It's called Santa Marta. And what they did, and actually I invited my whole company, all 70 staff, we flew into Rio, and we helped, together with the people from Dulux, or Coral as it's called in Brazil, we helped to repaint this favela. And we didn't do it ourselves. It was shoulder to shoulder with inhabitants. And one of the guys who was in my group, he was actually, only a couple of months before that, he was a gang member. He had handed in his guns. This guy was now being trained as a painter. You see in the projects that they've done, and they do it in Brazil, but they do it all across the world, in China, in France, in South Africa, in the UK. They localize what they paint. So in Holland, it's football canteens. In the UK, it's schools. In Brazil, it's favelas. And you actually see criminality rates go down. And I can tell you something, also my own staff, secretaries included, having been there, having talked and seeing what the impact is, that really makes a difference. It fires people up. I'll talk more about the relevance of that in the how. And the third element is total experience. Total experience is basically, how you deliver what you promise to the outside world. And in a digital world, there's two axes that you need to keep in mind. The first axis is about the depth of what you offer, i.e., to what extent do you personalize, how do you use data to improve the proposition that you offer to your consumers? And nobody will argue with me that Amazon is a great example. I'll try here. I've done this in quite a few audiences. I asked people, who used Amazon a year ago? That's a significant number. Now, who uses Amazon now significantly more than they did a year ago? These guys are winning. These guys, in any country I come, these guys are winning. You know why? Because every time you go there, the next time your experience will be better, because they know you better and they tailor their solutions, their recommendations to your needs, to your profile, to your behavior. But there's a downside. I've worked recently quite a bit with Sony, and I've met the guy who was responsible for getting the credit card data of millions of people out in the streets. He had a very hard time. When we did roundtables with advisory boards and CMOs to prepare ourselves for this study, this came up a lot. CMOs spend a lot of time fighting with their legal counterparts. Actually, they feel that their hands are tied on their back because they know they can do so much. And yes, legal is saying you can't do anything because of this risk. It's a very, very relevant risk. It's very time-consuming for many marketing leaders. So one dimension is the depth, the other dimension is the breadth. With all technological changes, we have so much more touch points we can play with. And if you think of a company like Disney, I mean, guys, they own their equity, their characters, and you'll see them back in films, in games, in theme parks, even in cruises. But at the same time, I had a friend who did go on a cruise. It was not my thing, he did it. And he told me that when he then entered one of the theme parks, he wasn't recognized. It wasn't saying, hello, Mr. Johnson, thank you to have us with us again. No, because yes, they are managed in a very consistent way and through all the touch points, but the depth, there's more opportunity there. But the breadth also has a big downside. And we all know this from Marketing 101. If you mess things up in consistency, if one touch point seems to conflict or radiates another message, you're dead in the water. Your brand equity will go down very fast. Winning in Marketing 2020, yes, it's about depth, it's about breadth, but first and foremost, it's about both. And I want to hear I don't have many nice clips. I have a lot of great findings from the study, but I'll show you one clip on this one. Let me give you a little bit of background. This is Nike. And Nike, it was about, I don't remember the date exactly, I think 9 years ago, it was the first time that Adidas hurt them in their home market. So in their home market, they started to lose share. And what they did say, we need, and they didn't have shoes that were better. So the functional game was just not enough. And so what they decided is to look at both the breadth and the depth. And they developed the Nike Plus. I don't know if you remember it, some of you use it. You could stick it on your running shoe, and then it could talk with your iPod. And it gives some information now, how much you run and so on. So they did that, and it turned the tide. They got back on track again. And then they said, hey, wait 1 second. This is the future. So what they did, they cut their media budget, 250 million, doubled it, and invested it in the, let's say, the successor of the Nike Plus. It's a Nike Fuel Band.
This is the Nike Plus Fuel Band, made to inspire anyone to be more active. Its foundation is a universal system of measurement called Fuel. Unlike calories, Fuel lets you compare yourself with anyone, no matter what their body type is or what they're doing. The Fuel Band is the device you wear that tracks everything you do. One button lets you check your stats. LED lights change from red to yellow and then to green when you hit your goal. Motivation is the core of the experience. To make sure fuel is something people want to use and share every day, competition and celebration are built in. As we experimented with the algorithm behind Fuel and the design of the experience, our work gave us an insight we felt summed up the Fuel Band story. Everything you do counts.
Can you count, suckers?
At launch, this became the campaign that introduced Fuel to the world. From the moment they put it on in the morning, users are constantly interacting with the Fuel Band and the service that drives it. They are sharing more, talking about the brand more, and spending more on Nike products. Fuel has fundamentally changed Nike's business as well. From a marketer of athletic shoes to a company whose products and services work together in a system of value for consumers, and whose mission has become an obsession with using technology to make every athlete better. This is the Nike Plus Fuel Band.
Guys, so remember, big insights, purposeful positioning, total experience. So the insight, and I'm still, I love the insight of Nike running. It's so simple and so universally true, which basically is the first step is the hardest step. And anybody who runs or sports knows it. You're in your couch, you know how great you'll feel when you're done with running, but just getting up and getting yourself over that threshold. That's the insight. Their purpose is to unleash the athlete in every body. You don't need to be running the 100 meters in less than 15 seconds. You don't need to be, to run a marathon in less than 4 or 5 hours, whatever. And you could be an athlete when you're 70. It's a mindset. And that very clear direction, unleashing the athlete in everybody, that is leading. Not their shoes. They actually, when we visited them, they said, we consider ourselves a service company now. Think about that. Think about that. They see themselves as a service company. Now, this is a quote from one of the people we interviewed at Audi, who says, it's about the seamless interaction between showroom, the car, and the online space. It's the breadth and the depth. Now, that's the what. Let me now talk to you for the remaining of the time about the how. So how do you make it happen? What does it take in your organization to deliver this? Let's start with the connect, the first of the 5 drivers. So this is an interesting quote, right? Marketing is too important to be left just to marketeers. I think you could read it in many ways. The way I read it is, marketing's responsibility is way beyond marketing. Marketing is bigger than just marketing. Marketing is about integration and orchestration to deliver a total experience. And to do that, we can't be the guys of the 30-second ads who, who say that, yes, they're very effective, or 50% actually is very effective, but the other 50% of every euro we spend, we don't know where we lose it. No. And even the ROI thinking is mostly to finance. What it takes, and what winners show, is that they talk business, that their most important KPI is business growth. And this is interesting because, and this is US only, because we did this study in 2006, the ANA did this as well. And what you see is some very hard evidence that things are changing for marketing. We are working more closely, significantly more close with the CEO than we did in 2006, and approving large growth-oriented investment decisions. Marketing is at the table, much more so than only 7 years ago. And although this is US only, all indications I get from my clients is that it's happening everywhere. And yes, you've got, from the study we saw profiles. You've got the CMO or the marketing leader who thinks brand health and is really happy if, the Millward Brown health scores are really high. Then you've got the ones whose first and foremost KPI is a good return on any euro they spend. But the CMO and the marketing leader of the future wants to drive the business. And business acumen, being able to think and see the same priorities as your counterparts in the board, is your license to operate and your ticket to influence. And the way Sonja Klaassen says, I think we need more general management capability. Inspire. I already talked about Inspire. This, by the way, is also Dulux. This is, I believe, in the UK, where they do this with their staff. So we spend a big practice of us is called Purposeful Positioning. And I've spent with clients sometimes hours on end, sometimes days, in some cases weeks, and to be all honest, there's also a case where it's months. We're discussing and fine-tuning and crafting the last words in whether it's a brand ladder, a brand pyramid, a brand keyhole, and whatever, a brand propeller, whatever the format is in which you capture all the elements of your brand. You could discuss this till you're blue in the face. Our learning from this is stop engineering, start engaging. It's about engaging people around this purpose that you stand for. And there's a difference between winners and losers. Basically, it's not so big when it's about talking with families and friends. We all do that. People want to know where you work, right? But when we look at actually the effort we make to ensure that all employees are really engaged and clear about what the brand stands for, and the same to consumers, we see that winners do that a lot more than losers. And interestingly so, this is where Germany really sticks out versus global benchmark. If there's one thing you guys are really good at, and which will explain the success of some of your very powerful global brands, this is one of them. And yeah, Mark Dutzer says, basically a team on fire is unbeatable. And have worked for decades now with many global teams, I recognize that and I can support that a full 100%. And I don't know, did any of you see the movie The Internship? About two grown-up guys. Yeah, I don't know, I laughed. Those who didn't see it, well, go see it. It's not that great. It's just funny. But it also talks about googliness. And googliness, actually in 2007, I believe, after a long study, they actually made a test initially of 300 questions and they cut it down. And they actually score people also are you living the culture? Are you living the purpose of this brand? As a very important KPI for your own performance. And Zappos takes it even a step further. After you've been with 3 months with Zappos, they offer you a 2,000 check. You can leave. And you know what? You get 2,000 to go and leave. Also to the overperformers. And those people that find money important and the cause that Zappos stands for, the purpose of Zappos, that's the ones they want on their team. Focus. So, I'm going through a number of drivers, 5 of those. I have to say focus is the second most important if it comes to when we did a lot of regression analysis and the econometrists in our team they always want to know what the exact weight is of each element to the growth, to the success. Focus is very important. It has a big weight. And focus, yes, it's about focusing on your key strategic thrusts, on your absolute priorities and putting the KPIs in place. Having the right priorities, yes, is important. Communicating them and making people clear what they are, that in the middle of the night you wake them up, what are number 3, 1, 2, and 3 priorities, is even more important. That's the biggest difference between winners and losers. Winners make sure that everybody really understands. They don't necessarily need to agree with the priorities, they need to be crystal clear about what they are. And as a colleague of me puts it, at 30,000 feet, the weather always looks nice. And it's a nice quote, because what this shows here on the screen behind me is the ivory tower syndrome. If you are high in the hierarchy, then in most cases you'll be very satisfied and happy with the strategic thrust that you created them yourself or with your team. Yes, they're very happy with it. But if you go down, if you take distance, first in a hierarchical sense, but if you add to that the geographical sense, the further they're away, the less happy they are. So it's communicate, communicate, communicate. You can't, I see in so many best practices where every monthly, CEO or leadership call just starts by reiterating what's our purpose and what are the thrusts, what are the priorities to get us there. You can't over-communicate this. Then the second last, organize. This is about integration and orchestration. The guy you see here is Mr. Wah. Mr. Wah, he's the founder of Alibaba. I don't know if you know it. Alibaba is probably the most successful internet company in China. And trust me, it's a very, very, very big online market there. They're incredibly successful. And he doesn't call himself the CEO, he calls himself the Chief Experience Officer. So actually he does call himself the CEO. Anyway, what I'm trying to say is, when the founder is still there, this guy embodies what he started the company for. He embodies the total experience that they set out why he started the company to deliver. And everybody knows it. And you also know that if you do things that conflict with that, Mr. Wah will come and have a chat with you. That's why often founder-led companies are so successful, because they have, the embodiment of their purpose and their experience as a leader. What happens if he goes? In many cases, the best business leader takes over. Not seldom that's a CFO. And in itself, that's not a bad thing. CFOs are usually quite good at managing businesses. However, who is going to orchestrate and be responsible and accountable for the customer experience? That's where marketing needs to step in. That's where marketing needs to say, we actually own the customer experience. And that means that we'll have to orchestrate and that we'll have to work together with other functions. And you see it, over performance, work more with HR, work more with IT, work more with finance. It's no longer a silo. A total integrated customer experience is something that everybody in the company should be working with you on. And this is how Hans Christian Schwingen says it. You need the technical skills of the chief technology officer combined with the batteries of the chief marketing officer. You need both. This is the senior vice president of marketing at Motorola. Is also responsible for IT. Antonio De Lucio, he's the CMO of Visa. He took HR on for a year. He said, it takes me a year, but I need HR. If people are to live my brand, if I really need to influence their behavior, all for us to be able to deliver on the Visa purpose, I need to take responsibility of that. And then if you look at within our own marketing organization, in all honesty, our organization practice does a lot of, we do a lot of work, writing thick playbooks with who's responsible, who's accountable, who's to be informed, who authorizes, all the interfaces of any function, how do the interface, how's the decision making. I literally have, I'm not going to say it was one of the top 5 FMCG companies, and we had a 300-page book of the operating model of Latin America only. That's not the winning formula. If you look at companies like Red Bull, if you look at companies like Nike, what they do is they're very clear about what you are better at than anybody else, and they play to your strength. But it's a much more fluid way of working together because it's based on universal insights and because there's a very clear and compelling shared destiny that they call the purposeful positioning. And since these are so clear, we are more flexible to play on each other's strength and to work more as a team rather than to fight all the time over, well, actually, this is my remit and you can't decide that. You see very of those conversations in a Red Bull or a Nike. And one of the people we spoke to is, you will know him undoubtedly, Hendrik, Joe Tripodi. He also, we spoke to him for an hour and a half. And he said, we also talked about global and local. He said, the whole global and local thing, it's a bit passé for me. We like to see ourselves as a networked company at Coca-Cola. And this was, by the way, not casted or whatever. He spontaneously said, let me talk, for example, about the Christmas activation, as we all know, very important for the Coca-Cola brand. He said, as it turns out, year on year, the German team were the best at developing the Christmas activation work. So what we then said, you know what, Germany? You built the global Christmas activation toolkit for Coca-Cola, and others start using it. And Hendrik just gave another example of something else where they just let who's best, and that's not a corporate center who decides that. It's just looking at all of us, who's best at it, and just leverage in a very quick and fast way. And then if you take it even one level deeper and you look at individual profiles, I think moving towards 2020, we're beyond the general brand manager or whatever. You see very clear profiles. You see the thinkers, the guys who know how to work with big data, the analytics. Then you've got the feelers, if you will, the conversations managers, both internally and externally. They tell the story of the brand. They sit in social media. And you've got the creators. And the creators, I think in all honesty, are going to be much more about both traditional creativity and technological skills and creativity. And one stat, because I saw yesterday in the guest list, there's a lot of agency here. So this is one I pulled out from an American, that 58% of at least the American interviewees now have creative or part of creative in-house. And that's a very fast growing. It has everything to do with this previous slide that I showed. The last one, and then I'm also probably through my time, build. As I said, we looked at each of those drivers and the importance, the contribution to actually be winning. Build has the highest. And Lars Webke says, it's about building true marketing excellence. And boy, is he right. And you might think, well, towards Marketing2020, it's all about big data and social and so on. Well, actually, it's first about the basics. Just knowing your stuff when it comes to consumer insight and understanding, positioning, marketing strategy. Those, the ones that really get that, that's the biggest, let's say, explanator for being successful or not. And here is something where the German market, because what you see is that those that are successful, it doesn't come by itself. They're successful, they invest more on all the different topics, modules of marketing capability, but they also just spend more time on it. And I think that's an opportunity for the German market, because that's where Germany is really lagging behind. The investment in marketing excellence, in marketing capability, we call it often marketing, universities or academies, whatever you call them. Basically, where you decide how you do marketing, where you agree what your marketing, let's say, company's profile is. So where Procter & Gamble is all about the moment of truth, Danone is about functional performance, Unilever is about insights, they all have their own way of marketing, and that drives their curriculum. And the ones that invest in that, that's your easiest ticket to growth. So, let me summarize. I would have loved to talk here for the rest of the afternoon because there's so much more. We made splits for all the geographies and so on, but I'll keep it now to those 4 lessons. 1, make sure you create a compelling brand purpose with which you ignite the passion of the people in your company and outside your company. We see that people who are proud, who are passionate, start sharing, and people that share those brands that are the winning ones. Develop rich and make sure they're consistent, your experiences. And I think very important, also in the German context, inspire and empower in your organization, in a networked organization. It is a winning model over the traditional command and control. Think about that. And last, as said, certainly not least, equip your people with world-class capabilities for marketing in a digital world. There is no such thing as digital marketing. It's about doing marketing in a digital world. It's everywhere around us. Thank you very much for your attention.
Frank, dankjewel. I think there are not so many questions coming in via SMS. Do you have some questions? SMS. Maybe you have to show this number again. Vielleicht nehmen Sie alle mal ganz kurz einen Stift und schreiben mal auf die Blöcke, die wir dafür extra ausgelegt haben. Diese Nummer 0151, schreiben Sie sich bitte jetzt mal auf. 12 0012 80 oder fragen@owm.de. I'm quite sure there will be some questions to you later on, and we will have a coffee break. We're a little bit out of time. Okay. So if you have any questions to Frank, please don't hesitate to contact him anytime. Frank, dankjewel. Very interesting. Thank you very much. Frank van den Driest.